Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we are going to talk about prestige programming versus commoner content. We're going to talk about the really unusual delta that Dungeons and Dragons lands in, how strange Dungeons and Dragons is, and one of the reasons why we can really never stop asking this question: what is Dungeons and Dragons? It's very unusual, and I kind of really understand where, a lot of people, they want to be done with the question, right? But I really feel like Dungeons and Dragons really ain't like anything else in the world. It's really unusual, and it's an incredibly unusual brand, product, experience, right? And so let's dig into this. All right, so first of all, one of my favorite content creators in the world is right here on YouTube. Her name is Grace Randolph, and she is a movie reviewer. Great Pandy happened. Movies cracked in half. And guess what? Every movie reviewer in the world worth their salt is now doing content on, is now specifically doing content on the small screen too. So they're covering big screen and small screen, and they're trying to cover the best of both, right? Because there's a lot of junk in the movies, there's a lot of junk on, and there's kind of the cream of the crop on the big screen, and then you have the small screen, and the small screen is literally putting up content that is every bit as good as movies, if not better, right? In some small circumstances, right? So it's a complicated space, right? But one of the things is so because of this, Grace Randolph, not only does she is really amazing. She does this fantastic job of covering movies, and covering the big screen and the small screen. But she covers, what's really special is she covers the money, right? She covers the money, right? Which means she really covers the industry, and she is incredibly smart and capable, and really does some truly amazing content, right? So one of the big things is whenever there's a movement on one of the major streamers, she talks about it, right? So one of the things she recently talked about was what's going to happen with HBO Max, right? So I don't know, it is truly astounding, right? If you don't understand this, I watch HBO Max, right? And it's kind of weird. I have a lot of streamers, and a lot of them I don't pay for. So I don't pay for HBO Max. We got it when we have, like, not a joke, I think we have 6 phones on our plan, right? Reasons, right? And when we got our last phone on our plan, they're like, hey, you get HBO Max for free. And I'm like, bet, done, right? So, and I've been watching ever since, and it is phenomenal content. I watched Perry Mason on there. I watched Succession on there. I watched all of Game of Thrones on there. A lot of stuff, right? And there's really incredibly good content on HBO Max, but I get it for free, right? So it's a little bit complicated, but she was like, hey, guess what? Something's about to change, right? You're about to see a real change in this space, and something very unique is about to happen. I'm like, okay, I'm following you. Let's see this through, right? So Discovery, they own like the food, they own a bunch of channels that people watch reality television on, right? I don't watch any of this stuff, right? Like, they're like Home and Garden, and if you like it's not even National Geographic. It's some other weird, it's just weird stuff. I don't think there's any better way to explain it than just weird stuff, okay? That is mostly reality television. But they made so much money, they were able to buy HBO, right? Like, and there's this streaming service called HBO Max, which is just an extension of HBO, right? But, and so basically Grace was talking about, well, what are they going to put on HBO, right? And she started to talk about this, and she said, HBO has a history. It has a specific history of being prestige programming, right? Now, what is that, right? Well, what it is it's what a coastal elite will watch, right? And the perfect example, the moment she said it, I knew she was right? Was like White Lotus, right? So she explained this, right? So if you are a coastal elite, you have almost certainly seen both seasons of White Lotus. And if you are not a coastal elite, you have almost certainly never watched an episode of White Lotus, right? Like, White Lotus is literally a sad show about A very sad show about white people going on vacation internationally, right? Like, and the poorest people on the show make $100,000 a year, and the richest people on the show are legit millionaires, right? Like, so, like, and it's prestige programming. Like, you have to understand history, you have to understand culture, you have to care about wealth, you have to care about wealth classes to even get this show or to have any hope of enjoyment, right? And then she talked about like 4-quadrant shows, right? Which I'm going to call commoner content, right? And the moment she said this, I knew exactly what she was saying. NCIS, right? I have never in my life watched a whole episode of NCIS. It's unthinkable to me, right? Like, it's commoner content, right? Like, so one, also, let's talk about words, right? Like, so I've heard some people say that they don't like the term commoner. I get that, right? I get it. I don't want to say regular people because I don't think that's fair, right? Like, regular people can be wealthy and regular people can be poor. So the term regular people does not really help, right? The other thing is, like, Heartlander, right? Like, that's, that gets a little bit there. Like, somebody who actually, like, there's this whole, and Sagar was talking about this on Flagrant with Andrew Schultz. And they were talking about, like, have you ever been sore from working, right? Like, it's a great question. I can't tell you the last time my muscles ached because I worked, right? Like, it's just not a thing, right? Like, so so prestige programming is made for coastal elites. Commoner content is made for commoners, right? And by the way, if there's a better term for that, please let me know. I think some people think commoner is demeaning. I don't mean it to be demeaning at all. There are coastal elites and there are commoners. They are divided by wealth class. They're divided by education. They're divided by interest, and they're not the same people, right? And when I use those two words, I think people know exactly what I'm talking about. If there's a better, more kind, more tolerant way to say commoner, let me know, right? Like, I don't really think a regular person, that I'm tempted to use that, but I don't think that's accurate, and I don't think it's fair either, right? And I honestly don't think that commoner is pejorative. But if you think it is, and you got a better word, I love language. I'm ready. Give it to me, right? So, and Heartlander, I think, is also really what I want to say, but that just means lives in the middle of the country. And I will say, legit, I don't know why this is, but there's no question in my heart. I think people who are better people live in the middle of the country, and people who live on the East and the West Coast are worse human beings. By the way, I live on the East Coast. I live 15 miles south of Philadelphia, right? Like, so, so I'm, and I'm not positive I'm a coastal elite, but I sure know I'm a lot closer to a coastal elite than I am a commoner, because I have watched every episode of White Lotus, and I ain't never seen a single episode of NCIS. And there's literally I think 6 to 12 different NCIS shows, and there are literally over 1,000 NCIS episodes, so it's, yeah. So here's the thing. All right, thank you for going on this journey with me. Let's get to the point. All right, Dungeons and Dragons is in this incredibly unusual space, right? When the world looks, when the commoners, when the muggles, when people who have never played Dungeons and Dragons, and you ask them, hey, and I saw a lot of these reviews when we had Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. I saw reviews, they're like, I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, the board game. They didn't understand it as a tabletop role-playing game. The vast majority of commoners don't know what Dungeons and Dragons is, right? Like, they could not tell you. People know what Dungeons and Dragons. They know what Dungeons and Dragons is. They're like, it's something that people do in their basements, and they pretend to be elves. And I think they did it in the 80s, and maybe they still do it now. That's a commoner's conception of Dungeons and Dragons, right? And I think one of the reasons why we just landed in this space where Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves is a full-on, legit, 100% commercial failure. I've been hearing some little squawking around. Like, there's people just don't understand this. They don't understand movie numbers. And they, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, 100% critical success, both with the crowds and with the critics, right? Everybody loved this thing. Right, the only person in the world you can find who's got a harsh word to say about it is generally Professor Direct Message, who used to be Professor Dungeon Master, right? And he cherry picked a few, if you you look, 1 out of 100 reviews are bad, right? But anybody who's being honest and being fair and doesn't have a vendetta against Dungeons and Dragons, they're going to love this film, right? So it's a critical success, but it is a commercial failure, and it has no window to succeed commercially. Super Mario Brothers dropped the week after it and made $500 million in 9 days. That's faster than any animated movie in history, right? That is, so just to be clear, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves is a commercial failure. There's been a lot of confusion on this. People just don't know facts. People don't know the movie space, but it's a commercial failure, okay? So here's the issue. So here's where we land. Why? So number one reason that Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves is a commercial failure, this is I believe this deep to my bone, is the OSR allies really shafted it with their very dedicated D&D Be Gone, boycott D&D hat, Honor Among Thieves. It was effective. It worked, right? And OSR allies can check the box for destroy Dungeons & Dragons movie. They did it, right? That's 90% of the reason. 5% of the reason is on us. It's on the D&D community, and it's on the D&D design team. So let's talk about that, right? Here's where we get to prestige program versus commoner content. This is really fascinating, okay? Commoners consider Dungeons & Dragons prestige programming. To them, it's White Lotus, right? They're like, I don't know about wealth classes and and vacationing in Italy and vacationing in where was it first? Oh, in Hawaii. I don't know anything about that. That's not my world, right? And why do they think that about? Why do they think Dungeons & Dragons is prestige programming? They're not wrong, right? If you are a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Dungeon Master, you have 8,000 pages of content that is canon. Ain't nobody I got 2 degrees. That's why I love Dungeons & Dragons. I have a bachelor's in political science and I have a master's in business administration, right? And so I have an MBA, right, with a specialization, right? That's why I'm comfortable with 8,000 pages of canon content, right? Which I've read through, and I'd say I've read through about 75-80% of it, right? And so it's thousands of pages of content. There's no way it's ever going to be commoner content if we keep Dungeons & Dragons structured the way it is. Now, okay, so commoners see Dungeons & Dragons as prestige programming, as snooty HBO coastal elite content, right? Coastal elite programming, right? What's interesting is once you get into, so that's the Muggle space, that's the commoner space. People don't know Dungeons & Dragons, right? Once you get into the Dungeons & Dragons community, and specifically the tabletop role-playing community, which is 90% Dungeons & Dragons, I'm convinced, I don't believe for 1 second, anyone who plays tabletop role-playing games has never played Dungeons & Dragons, right? I hear people squawk about it on Twitter. I don't think it's true, right? I don't. The gate to tabletop role-playing games is through Dungeons & Dragons. Maybe you come in through something in the beginning, but if you stick around for even 2 months, you're going to end up playing D&D at some point. You just don't go into the TTRD space. It's like water. Everybody's drunk water, right? If you're in the TTRD space, you play Dungeons & Dragons at some point, right? And so within the tabletop role-playing game community, this is where it gets interesting. They consider tabletop role-playing game, many tabletop role-playing game enthusiasts, they consider Dungeons & Dragons commoner content. And they say, oh, PBTA is the prestige program, right? Oh, Fate is the prestige program. Oh, Zweihander is the prestige program. Oh, Index Card RPG, that's the prestige programming. The commoner content is Dungeons & Dragons. So we are simultaneously cut out and marginalized. If you're a Dungeon Master, if you're a Dungeons & Dragons player, you are the most marginalized group in tabletop role-playing games. The people who don't understand what you do say that you are prestige programming, right? The people in your TTRPG space say you're commoner content, right? And so we get squeezed in the middle. Right? Is there a fix to this? Yes, there is a fix to this. Will we do it? No. Let me tell you what the fix is, and then you'll see immediately why we're never going to do it. In order to make Dungeons & Dragons accessible, right, to anyone who doesn't have 2 degrees, right, what you're going to have to do, and of course there's exceptions, right? Like I have a follower here. He's a construction worker. I don't think he has a degree, right? And he's a huge D&D fan. There's people out there like that. They're incredibly rare. Okay, so basically, but the reality is, I think most people who play Dungeons & Dragons have 100 sessions under their belt, got 2 degrees or more, right? I don't even have a doctorate. I got a bachelor's and a master's, right? I know there's a lot of people who have doctorates who play D&D, right? But the reality is, they are essentially coastal elites. They are people pursuing prestige programming, right? So we get caught in the middle. So how will we fix this? The DMG, the PHB, and the Monster Manual all need to fit in, like literally, that's 750 pages of content now. That's got to get shrunk to 99 pages. Literally a book under 100 pages long that covers everything the DMG covers, everything the Monster Manual covers, everything the PHB covers, which means it's got to be elegant and simple and fast, right? There ain't no market. There is no tolerance for that within the tabletop role-playing game community. And the reality and the reason why is, in my humble opinion, people want to keep Dungeons & Dragons small. They want to keep it cozy. They want to keep it to themselves, which I think is frustrating, very frustrating. I wish it wasn't this way, and I just don't think there's no one seeking to change Dungeons & Dragons at that fundamental level, right? And that would be the fix, right? And then, get this, right? Every adventure would need to be 32 pages long. 32 pages long, right? If you did that, you would make the game far more accessible. You would make it elegant, simple, fast, right? And but there's absolutely zero interest in that in the tabletop role-playing game community, because I think the tabletop role-playing game community wants to keep the commoners out, which I don't, right? And I wish this was going to change, but it ain't never going to change. If you're a dungeon master, if you're a serious D&D Dungeons & Dragons player with 100 sessions under your belt, you are the most marginalized person in all of tabletop role-playing games. You get viewed as prestige programming by the world, and you get viewed as commoner content by the people within the community. It's not fair. It's just the way it is. I just told you the fix. We ain't never going to get there, and it's sad. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.